and welcome to the show. Today, we have an extremely special guest and a friend of mine, and I'm going to go over a little background before we bring him on. When COVID started in early 2020, I have a friend named Laura Bartlett that I used to do stand-up comedy, and her brother, who is our guest today, he started sharing his protocol, budesonide, and tried to get it out to the public. And I interviewed him early on, and then he got interviewed on a lot of other shows and got silenced and smeared. And we'll talk about this with him. But I created a website called COVID Silver Bullet that got taken down. And then we created another one called Budesonide Works. And I have been working with him hand in hand ever since then, volunteered to step up to help people survive COVID. And it has been a long and arduous journey for him and for me too. And so we're going to play a little clip, and then I'm gonna introduce him. Okay.
I'm Dr. Larry Burchett, MD, an actively practicing ER doctor and the medical expert for Fox in San Francisco. Let's get into this viral video by Dr. Richard Bartlett, who claims to have the silver bullet treatment for coronavirus, using inhaled steroids, budesonide. That simply isn't true. That's simply false. Very common medication that nobody knows about. I just have to laugh.
But others in the medical community aren't convinced it's what it's cracked up to be.
There is no silver bullet at the moment, and there might never be.
There is no silver bullet response to the virus at the moment, and there might never be.
If you're hearing things about things that are just so too good to be true, it probably is. And
there's no scientific proof,
Since March, he claims inhaled steroids are the cure for COVID-19.
And I wish it was as simple as that.
The CDC also says there is no known cure for COVID-19, so we can verify that claim is false.
That people who are thinking about maybe getting some off-label use of budesonide, that you not do that. We can't tell you that that's going to help you, and there's even a possibility that if you use these steroids too early or too much of them, that you could harm yourself and worsen your chances of surviving COVID-19.
Is there any downside to there are people that are believe that budesonide and taking zinc is working. Is there any downside to doing it?
There's a placebo effect to make you feel better and less anxious, but in reality, Matthew, it doesn't have any effect.
And to think that that simple medication is the cure that could have saved 500,000 people.
Our guest today has been a general practice and emergency medicine physician for 30 years. He has, as well as a medical director for multiple facilities. He was the CBS News medical expert for West Texas for 20 years. He received the Meritorious Service Award from Texas Health and Human Services. He was appointed by Governor Rick Perry for the Texas Health Disparity Task Force for 7 years. That appointment was supposed to be for 2 years, and he kept getting asked to come back over and over. He has served as Texas Medical Association Board of Counselors. He served at 4 terms as the president of the County Medical Society. He is the medical director of the World Missions Alliance, and he's the author of 2 books, including Journey of a Medicine Man, and he is the discoverer of the budesonide protocol that literally saved millions of lives during COVID. Welcome to the show, my good friend, Dr. Richard Bartlett.
I'm honored. Jody, I'm honored to join you, and Annie, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Dr. Bartlett. We are honored to finally be able to have a chat with you.
Yes, we're
I
very
love
excited.
that accent. I could listen to that all day.
She hears that all the time. So let's just start kind of in the beginning a little bit. Let's go back to what was going through your mind at the beginning of COVID as an emergency room physician when it hit.
Jody, I only knew what they told us. We were told doctors were told the same thing as patients around the world. We were told, hide in place, shelter in place, be afraid, be very afraid. We have something we've never seen before, and you're just going to have to trust us. and you're going to have to wait until we make a magical vaccine, a one-time, one-shot vaccine. And I was working in the ER, and that didn't set well with me because I have patients that are coming in that are car wrecks, heart attacks, strokes, gunshot wounds, and I have to take care of them. I'm a Christian, so I was praying between patients, Lord, what do I do if someone comes in here and they're dying of COVID and they say, I can't breathe? It's not enough for me to say, I don't have an answer. It's not enough for me to say, go home and try tough it out with Tylenol when people were dying. And so I was in the call room for a quick cat nap on a 48-hour shift when no patients were in the ER. And I was asleep when a strategy came to me. And I was shocked. I knew I had an answer to prayer. And 5 days later, I had my first patients with COVID, and they bounced out of the hospital real quick. The hospital, the nurses, the doctors, the patients, everybody was shocked. Everybody was surprised. And that was just the beginning of this roller coaster ride. And what a rodeo it's been. We started trying to get the word out that we're not helpless, that we have some medicines that are inexpensive, readily available, safe, that have been out for 30 years, that works. And I was shocked at the pushback, Jody, that people didn't want that information out, that they didn't want to share the good news. When I was contacted by our RFK Jr. And on his Instagram Live account, we were doing an interview, and they cut my audio about 5 minutes into the interview. I didn't know what had happened, but RFK went off on him. He did a 30-minute rant on the First Amendment and censorship of free speech. That was my christening into this world of being censored, suppressed, being attacked for trying to help people. This was foreign to me because before that, I was an accomplished doctor, a teacher of doctors on how to take care of emergency room patients that were trauma patients to other trauma doctors, and for 30 years on and off. Also, medical director of multiple ambulance services, multiple emergency rooms, hospice, home health agencies. I had done everything, and I've had no lawsuits in 30 years of taking care of disasters, which is kind of exceptional, and I'm grateful for that. But I just had never had this kind of pushback, never been attacked personally, professionally. As a matter of fact, when I had people calling me about their loved ones in hospitals and I just was sharing the science with them, I couldn't believe that hospital doctors and hospitals attacked me through the medical board trying to take my license. They took 4 runs at me and they lost every time because what I had on my side was science. And so that really frustrated them. And now all I can hear, Jody, is crickets from their direction because, hey, Oxford University, the oldest university in the English-speaking world since 1096, with 72 Nobel Prize laureates since 1096, they did the Stoic trial and the Principle trial, 2 randomized controlled trials, which is how we do science outside of Fauci world, outside of clown world. We do randomized controlled trials. And they said they stopped the study early, Jody, because they said it's not ethical. It's not ethical for us to continue this study and give a placebo to a crowd that's getting a placebo in the study that could die from this disease when we found something that's overwhelmingly effective. They concluded that 90% of hospitalizations, ER visits, urgent care visits would not happen if people were treated with early treatment with just the budesonide by itself. But that's not my whole protocol. You know, think about that for just a second. 1.1 million Americans died. What if 90% of those never went to an emergency room or a hospital?
Yeah, because you were trying to keep people from going to the hospital. Your protocol was everybody get a nebulizer, get budesonide, and do it from home, heal from home. Because everybody who went to the hospital, most people didn't come back home.
It's still happening.
Mm-hmm.
If someone goes to the hospital, they're going to get the protocol brought to you by, several pharmaceutical companies that have remdesivir as their first line treatment. They're going to give IV steroids. They're going to have a ventilator for you. And I was shocked at the non-science bad medicine that was being practiced around the world. And I'll give you an example. In West Texas, the level 2 trauma center, the county hospital, was putting plastic bags over people's heads in the ER that tested positive for COVID. And Jody, you can show that picture later if you want to.
Yeah, I've got it. So we'll put it in. Yeah, it's crazy.
I think that's a picture of medical tyranny. Enough said. A picture's worth 1,000 words. I'm speechless that this would be allowed, that no one was held accountable. No one was punished for this. That's it. They did this to minors, to children. If you walked past a daycare and you saw them putting a plastic bag over a child's head, and their excuse was, we're trying to protect the workers at the daycare from this child, that's called child abuse. But if you have a hospital do it and they call it a COVID protocol, the exact same picture it gets a pass.
Yeah.
And here's what really bothered me.
And it happened for a whole year, right? They did it for a whole year.
To over 1,000 patients.
Yeah.
And so, you have doctors and nurses that saw this happening and they looked the other way for a year. I have no explanation for that that's ethical and moral or legal. If you see abuse to a child or an elder or anybody, you're supposed to intervene or at least report it. Right. You're in trouble in the United States if you don't report abuse.
Right.
Yet for a whole year, doctors and nurses looked the other way, turned their head, and didn't take care of the patients that were had a deadly disease that could kill them, and many people were dying. And so, if you'll look at the pictures of this protocol, people had a mask on, they had a bag on, and in the picture you see no supplemental oxygen. And so that is an example of bad medicine, non-science, nonsense that's happened for the last 3.5 years in the name of COVID, in the name of a pandemic. And so I have seen this pattern of doctors looking the other way because they're worried about their practice, their finances, their reputation, their relationships with people, instead of focusing on maybe someone outside of their body, like the patient. And so enough is enough. When I called that out, I got attacked. But hey, I'm still here, and they're embarrassed now.
Yeah.
And patients aren't getting bags over their heads.
So Annie used to be a nurse in a senior care home. So what would have happened, Annie, if a caregiver, a nurse, would have put a plastic bag over a patient's head where they couldn't
immediate dismissal?
Yeah.
And then you're charged. Like basically, then they'd file legal proceedings, and you'd never be able to work again in aged care. Never.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, we still have the same hospital administrators, same hospital board, same nurses, same doctors. And it's a blight on the community.
Yeah,
it's a major embarrassment.
And they put out articles about Dr. Bartlett in the local papers, comparing him to Clark Griswold from the National Lampoon Vacation movies. like it's just so crazy.
Well, when I think about it, Jody, Clark Griswold, I think, was he was a scientist, and he was making food varnish. So at least he had a smidgen of science compared to what we've seen for the last 3.5 years.
Compared to Russell Tippin, right?
I will say that they are my opponents because I'm for the patients, and clearly these things were not helpful to patients.
Right.
And look at the current COVID shots that they just put out. I'm just going to call it what it is. It's a COVID shot, and they're saying for 6 months old up to 11 years old, they're recommending it. Well, there's pediatricians in Osaka, Japan, that are not recommending it.
Right.
Breaking news: Japan is following the science, and they're citing the evidence that there is negative efficacy evidence, meaning that if someone gets 4 COVID shots, they're more likely to get COVID than if they got 3 COVID shots.
Exactly.
Hey, I'm just going to say it. Osaka, Japan. If you're going to be mad at the science. But from 6 months to 11 years old, it's emergency use authorization, human experimentation still today.
Wow.
FDA approved.
So I want to go back just for a second, because I want to ask you a question before we get to all the stuff about the shots. Is why do you think your protocol was so suppressed?
Because
we heard about ivermectin, but we did not hear about budesonide.
Well, here's what I know. Dr. Ben Carson was on the White House Coronavirus Task Force. And he said 2 months ago on a news interview with Chris Salcedo on Newsmax that the FDA has a rule that you cannot give emergency use authorization for any product, including a vaccine, for human experimentation if there's already an effective treatment. And so we had a treatment that is proven by Oxford University in the STOIC trial, the principal trial, studied and proven to be effective in every single study, including out of Brazil, the Together trial that was published in the Annals of Internal Medicine, that is effective. And so you had to suppress, according to, this is what an insider said, Dr. Ben Carson, who's a brilliant doctor. He said they had to suppress budesonide because you can't do emergency use authorization from the FDA if you have an effective treatment.
Right.
Hello.
Yeah.
Enough said. Case closed. We have an effective treatment.
Yeah.
So they're not following the rules. They're not following the law.
So that's how they got remdesivir approved, right? And the shots, right?
So, they want to bait people into talking about hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin.
Mm-hmm.
And in my opinion, Jody, they're baiting people to talk about that because there's studies that show that it works and there's study that shows that it doesn't work. And so it's controversial and they can start calling you names.
Yes.
But there's one word they do not want to ever hear on mainstream media. And that word is budesonide, because budesonideworks.com. If they want more information, I would say they need to go to budesonideworks.com, click on the science tabs, the studies that confirm that it works. And,
it's a long list of evidence on that website.
Yes.
Long list. So they suppress this with, what you're basically saying, so that they could get the shots approved. Because that was the plan all along.
Apparently so, but you know what? They didn't tell the doctors.
Right.
And so we were concerned about our patients. And so we were looking for answers because we didn't want anyone to die.
Right.
We're not willing to sacrifice people. And let's just think about this for a minute. We're 3.5 years into this, for almost 4 years. And we've heard President Biden say there's no longer an emergency. We've had every governor acknowledge that there's no longer an emergency. And yet they're giving emergency use authorization for the most vulnerable during their developmental period of 6 months to 11 years old. They're making them the lab rats. Emergency use authorization, human experimentation for an experimental product, knowing that when we gave a request, a FOIA request to the FDA, the nonprofit, the doctors formed a nonprofit organization called Public Health and Medical Professionals for Transparency. And we have a responsibility to tell the patients informed consent. It's their right. It's a patient right. It's a doctor's responsibility. And we didn't have any information. They weren't giving us any about these shots. They were just saying safe and effective, period, even though we saw that people were dying.
Right.
Even though we saw the CDC website showing 35,000 deaths from the COVID shots in 2 years, 1.5 million injured from the COVID shots in the last 2 years. But we had no information to give informed consent. So we gave a Freedom of Information Act request to the FDA saying, give us the Pfizer data that you made this decision on to put this product out to the masses. And the FDA said, we know what you want. We have that in the computer. We're supposed to give that to you. We don't want to give this information to the public for 55 years.
Yeah.
And then they thought about it for 2 weeks and they said, we were wrong. We don't want to give this to the American people for 75 years. And then then we met them in federal court And the federal judge says, this is crazy. You're supposed to give this information to the American people. That's the law. And they pushed back through the Department of Justice lawyers saying, we don't have enough staff to release this to the American people for 75 years.
Yeah.
The judge says that's not going to work. And so we got 1/40th of that information, and we got a list that Pfizer accumulated about their product of 1,200 diagnoses that'll either kill you immediately or could permanently disable you, including myocarditis and pericarditis, which we all know can happen, including dozens of cardiac events, including dozens of neurologic disorders, including dozens of autoimmune disorders, including all kinds of things that I never would have thought were associated with it that are being in the medical literature around the world right now. And so now we know why they didn't want the public to know what they know.
Yeah.
And so
and I want to stop you right there, because I want to emphasize that Dr. Bartlett was key to Pfizer releasing that data. That was the 9 pages, as he said, 1,200 diagnoses in tiny little type. And I'm sure a lot of our viewers have seen that data of all the horrific diseases and conditions that these shots caused. And it's saying that it's the direct result, I believe, correct? Yes.
This is a list that Pfizer made
yes.
of diagnoses associated with their product post-marketing,
right.
after it got out to the masses. And so this is what they knew, and they didn't, and Pfizer never did tell the public,
yeah,
to my knowledge.
Yeah.
And the FDA didn't want to tell the public for 75 years.
Yeah.
So I thought the FDA was supposed to protect us from bad medicine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what are they doing?
Yeah.
And so let's talk about this for just a second, Jody. Do you know what company has had to pay the largest criminal fine in the history of the world?
Pfizer.
$1.1 billion in criminal fines. And when you add the civil fines for what 10 years ago, the Department of Justice was holding them accountable. Now you got them trying to keep the information from the American people. 10 years ago, the Department of Justice said that Pfizer was purposely misleading the public about their product. And so they had to pay $2.3 billion cumulative for the criminal and civil fines. They hold the record for the largest criminal fine in history on the planet. And so should we believe everything they say?
No.
And so think about this. The FDA looks at information that they get from Pfizer about safety and effectiveness in studies, and then they look at that. They don't do any other studies. They don't do studies to confirm it. And then they will either rubber stamp it, emergency use authorization, which is what we're seeing, or they'll FDA approve it. But whatever they do is based on Pfizer information. What is that? What is that?
Yeah.
Think about that for just a minute.
Wow.
And think about when you go into a chain pharmacy, let's just say Walmart, CVS, Walgreens. Well, those three last year got slapped with $13.8 billion for pushing, according to the fine, $13.8 billion for their contribution to the opioid epidemic. Did you know that?
No.
For pushing drugs.
Yeah.
I thought they were in healthcare, or maybe they're more into the business and you can follow the money.
Yeah.
So here's the money you can follow. $13.8 billion. Follow that and see where that leads you for CVS, Walgreens, and Walmart. When you hear overhead while you're getting your prescriptions, we have a new COVID shot for you. Line up for your booster. It's safe and effective. Well, are you telling us the rest of the story, that the 1,200 diagnoses that the FDA is the source of? Are you telling us about the 35,000 deaths reported at the CDC website on your commercial overhead? Are you telling us about the 1.5 million that are injured according to the CDC VAERS website overhead while I'm going down the aisle of candy? I don't think so. So Consider the source.
So why do you think doctors were so willing to go along with the shots, no informed consent, pressuring and even shaming their patients into getting the shots with no data to support it?
Either ignorance or they're complicit, are the only two options.
Or they got paid. They got paid to do it.
Well, I did see, and you probably saw that if you haven't seen it, the Blue Cross incentive program for how many shots, percentage of your COVID patient, percentage of your Blue Cross patients, 25% of your patients. If 20% or 30% get a jab in the arm, then you get a $25 a head. If you got 75% of the patients that are Blue Cross in your network, a shot in the arm, then you get $125 a head. I'll send that to you so you can look at that.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, that's what I said. What?
Yeah.
Here's informed consent, Jody. Informed consent means a doctor has a responsibility, according to the American Medical Association Code of Medical Ethics, to tell every treatment option, the risk and benefit of every treatment option, and if there's a financial conflict of interest. Boy, that third one's really important, apparently. And so, for instance, if someone had cancer, we could say, well, here's your treatment options: chemo, radiation, surgery, natural remedies, nothing at all. And who gets to decide what they're going to do with that information? The patient in the United States up until now. And no one argues about that with chemotherapy medicine for cancer, by the way, that the patient has a right to refuse it.
Right.
Well, what is going on right now that we have a non-FDA approved product and we don't have an emergency? It's emergency use authorization, human experimentation, and it's being pushed on children that are 6 months old to 11 years old. Explain that to me. How that's appropriate.
And they just approved the fifth booster, right? Just now.
And so that was yesterday on 9/11. And so on 9/11 is also the day that Kroger got told that they got to pay $1.2 billion for the same thing with the opioid epidemic, their contribution to promoting it. And so, why? Because people died and people were injured and families were destroyed because of that. What is happening now when 35,000 people die, according to the CDC website, from a product? What is happening now when 1.5 million are injured, according to the CDC VAERS website, from a product, and it's being promoted?
Well, and did the CARES Act prevented people from suing? Is that correct?
So thanks to that kind of creative financing from the federal government, there's millions of dollars given to local health departments through the states to promote a product and not to give informed consent. They're not telling the full story. They're not saying, hey, for 6 months old to 11 years old, guess what? That's a ongoing placebo study, and your kid might not even be getting the product. They're not being told that their kid might be getting a placebo, because guess who the lab rat is?
You are.
It's not a rat.
Yeah.
And so this is the facts. And I haven't heard it overhead in a chain pharmacy yet.
Yeah, I haven't either. And they're still promoting them.
Hey, let's talk about the facts. President Biden said, if you get the shot, you won't get COVID.
Yeah.
He said that. That wasn't the facts. But the fact is he said that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Fauci said, if you get the shot, you can be confident that you won't get COVID. The fact is he said that. It was a lie. It was not true.
And how many times has he gotten COVID?
Yeah. And so the story, the mainstream media, is that he got 4 shots and then he got COVID twice.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so, you got to at some point say, I'm not going to listen to a source of information that has lied to me over and over and over again.
Yes.
You need to look for a different source of information.
Yeah.
And so, or if this is more comfortable for you, at least you have the right. But I'm telling you, there are if there's a conflict of information, then one's right and one's wrong.
Yeah.
And so when we were led to believe, the whole world was led to believe that Fauci was going to lead a campaign for a magical vaccine, and we would all get enough percentage of the population vaccinated, then this would be over and we'd get our normal lives back. That was the myth that we were all told, and it's in the history books. You can find it on the internet. They haven't scrubbed it yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and I've lost count.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, what about the Cleveland Clinic saying the more shots you get, the more likely you are to get COVID? Are you hearing Fauci acknowledge that?
No.
Are you hearing the CDC director? They got a new one. Have you heard her acknowledge that? Have you heard that same old president that says, look, folks, I'm losing my patience? That guy. Have you heard him say, here's the truth. There's a negative efficacy according to the Cleveland Clinic.
Yeah.
Have you heard him tell the truth that they made the vaccines that are out right now to a variant that is not going around, XBB 1.5, and instead what we have right now is EG5, a totally different strain? Is anyone acknowledging that they missed it?
Well, and they aren't even really, I mean, do you know what's in the shots? Do you do? Because there's so many things that
it's so interesting that they've added tromethamine, a heart attack medicine, to the children's shots, but not to the adults' shots, not to the elderly shots. Huh. Well, why would they add a heart medicine to a young person shot? Oh, maybe it has something to do with what has escaped their ability to hide from the public, the myocarditis that's happening to young people. I don't know. Maybe. I'm just speculating. But I'm going to say that's an interesting coincidence. Mm-hmm. And the fact that they didn't tell the public that it has SM-102 made by the Cayman Chemical Company, which, according to its original OSHA papers, can cause cancer, can cause damage to the fetus, can cause problems with fertility, according to the original OSHA paper, which later was changed, by the way, during the pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Surprise, surprise.
Details.
Yeah. So when did you start noticing the side effects, people coming into your ER?
I work in the ER, and so I had patients coming in, of my patients who 2 hours before went to the chain pharmacy, got a COVID shot. They collapse. Then they're my patient in the ER, and they can't. And one patient, that's her story. She only got the shot because the in-laws wouldn't visit until she got the shot. And now she can't move anything on the right side of her body. She can't feel anything on the right side of her body. Did that help her?
No.
And then I had another patient who came in. She got the shot 2 hours before at a different location. She's my patient in the ER. She goes home after the shot. She tries to stand up. Her legs don't work. She's paralyzed from the waist down. She has transverse myelitis. She's her spinal cord was hit.
Wow.
That's on both of these things are on the list that Pfizer made about their product that the FDA had to release by court order.
And that was only a fraction, correct?
1/140th.
Yeah. Oh. And so, I think of the study that came out of the University of Basel in Switzerland, where they said, hey, 3%, 2.8% of the people that get COVID shots have an elevated cardiac enzyme marker called troponin. Troponin is in healthy heart cells. When heart cells die, they spill troponin into the bloodstream. It's a test for heart cells dying in real time. It's the test. If you come to an emergency room and you have elevated troponin blood test, you're going in the ICU. You're not going home. But they're according to that study in the University of Basel, 2.8% of the people that got a COVID shot have elevated troponin, meaning they had heart cells die. Are people being told that? I haven't heard that acknowledged.
No.
So that you put that together with the myocarditis that everybody sees in the public now, with the people that are dying suddenly, which is now a phenomena that was not a big deal 3 years ago, became a big deal coincidentally at the same time the COVID shots were rolled out. These are a lot of coincidences are lining up right now. But the good news is we have an effective treatment strategy. If people want to learn more about it, go to budesonideworks.com.
This is true.
It's generic. It's inexpensive. It's readily available. Budesonide is an inhaled steroid that for 30 years has been given to 2-pound premature babies. There's no more delicate human on the planet than a 2-pound preemie in the ICU. And that's what we give budesonide to for 30 years without worrying. It's that safe. And it's $3 a treatment if you have to pay the full cash price without a discount at the pharmacy. And it's readily available. It's at every pharmacy on every corner in the United States and around the world. That's why, Jody, in India, they added it to their treatment strategy for the government treatment strategy for COVID. That's why budesonide was added to the 840-page treatment strategy of Australia for COVID. Early treatment. How about that?
Yeah.
But in the United States, you had Fauci being asked, what about budesonide for COVID? Very early in the pandemic, Matthew McConaughey asked Fauci on the
Instagram Live. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what about budesonide for COVID? And Fauci said it's just a placebo. It doesn't work. He didn't offer any science. I'm going to go with what Oxford said. I'm going to go with Iran, France, Spain, Oxford in the UK, Australia, Queensland University in Australia, the NIH in the United States. I'm going to go with all the science. I'm not going to go with him on that.
Yeah. So when you were looking at the 1,200 diagnoses, and I believe you looked at every single one of them, and what was the one that you told me was the smoking gun?
Oh, there's one diagnosis that Pfizer added to their list that shocked me. I showed it to a cardiologist that's a brilliant doctor, Dr. Peter McCullough. When I saw it, it's AIDS cancer, Kaposi sarcoma. Can you think of a medical product that the FDA said, here, it's okay for the public to have this and throw this out to the whole world that has the potential of Kaposi sarcoma, AIDS cancer? You know, it's a cancer. So the American Cancer Society knows something about cancers. So if you go to the American Cancer Society and you search Kaposi sarcoma, it's going to say it's an AIDS-defining illness. And they're right. Wow. And so what in the world? Well, did I mention that there's dozens of autoimmune disorders that Pfizer listed associated with their product? Apparently, it can jack with an immune system sometimes. And so what happens with an immune system that is injured? Well, there was a study that was published out of China in December of 2022 that said for lab mice in China that various tests of their cellular and humoral immunity, their T cell and B cell immunity, have been injured, are not working as well. So if you're a lab mouse in China, don't get 5 or more COVID shots, apparently, because they said it happens after the 5th shot for mice.
Wow.
And so I'm just saying, there's a whole lot of information out there, and all I hear is propaganda saying safe and effective. We got a new booster. Roll up your sleeve.
I know.
Do your part.
Well, and I know a lot of people who either they had cancer, they were in remission for years, and then all of a sudden it's back at stage 4, or they get stage 4 out of cancer out of nowhere. And they're all vaccinated, and I think most of them have gotten the boosters too. So explain how that could happen.
Well, your immune system has a system called immune surveillance, where your immune system will find a cancer cell and recognize that it's not healthy and kill it immediately. And for a healthy person with a healthy immune system, they make cancer cells from time to time throughout your life, and they get killed. But if your immune system is not functioning right, all of a sudden you can get a cancer that you normally wouldn't have. For instance, with AIDS, people have increased incidence of every cancer. And there are certain cancers that only are associated with AIDS. But the reality is the risk of every cancer is increased with AIDS because their immune surveillance is no longer working.
Yeah, and that's why I've seen so many. I've seen a lot of women with uterine cancer. I've seen breast cancer just exponentially, and just all kind like rectal cancer, which is supposedly rare. And I know 3 people who got that who were vaccinated.
Yeah. So the bottom line is that every medicine we're supposed to tell informed consent, risk and benefit of treatment options, every treatment option, and we're supposed to tell if there's a financial conflict of interest. I don't think I've heard any of those. And when I've talked to patients that were in the hospital with COVID in another town, and the family asked me after the fact, they were never told the treatment option of budesonide, even though Oxford proved that it was effective against COVID. They were never told the risk of remdesivir. They were never told the risk of increased mortality, death, if they're put on a ventilator. Many of them were told, you look tired. Let me give you a rest and paralyze you with chemicals and put you at our mercy and put you on a ventilator, and which will increase your chance of dying from COVID statistically.
Now, Dr. Bartlett, can I ask, with standard prior to COVID, with standard medical interventions, when is it appropriate to ventilate someone?
Well, you don't do that. It's an invasive procedure. It has inherent risk, and it should be your last resort. It shouldn't be something that you're pushing and promoting as an early intervention. That's a fundamental fact, Annie. And so every patient needs to be treated as an individual. But the bottom line is we will intubate somebody to protect their airway if they can't breathe.
Yep.
But if someone's airway is not at risk, then you don't need to protect their airway. And for COVID patients, that was a non-issue. Secondly, we help with breathing. And so there's lots of things you can do short of putting someone on a ventilator to help them with breathing. Supplemental oxygen, different BiPAP. But by the way, budesonide helps with breathing. It's an anti-inflammatory.
Well, that's what's so funny is during it wasn't really off-label. I mean, they were acting like, oh, you can't do that. Every time we would try to help someone who's in the hospital and ask for that, help their family, ask for budesonide as a protocol, and they would say no, and they would say it was off-label. And it's like, but it's FDA approved for breathing and for lung stuff. But they were using remdesivir, which wasn't even approved for anything at the time. They were just told to do that.
Authorization, human experimentation.
Yeah.
And so it was not FDA approved when it first came. But let's talk about things that are FDA approved. Does that mean that it absolutely is guaranteed to be safe? Write this down if you're watching the show. VIOXX, Vioxx.
Oh, yeah.
That's a medicine that was FDA approved until over 30,000 Americans died from sudden death, heart attacks. And then eventually the outcry from the public was so loud that it was withdrawn from the market. Only after 30,000 plus deaths. So just because something's FDA approved doesn't mean it's a good idea. And so you got to consider the source. Let's talk about the CDC for a minute. Can you believe everything they say? Well, there's this disease called monkeypox. And if you go to their website, they're still recommending a mask for monkeypox. Monkeypox is not a respiratory disease. It's spread in a similar way as HIV. That's not a respiratory disease.
Wow.
Would you, so in your mind, do you see a mental picture of someone wearing a mask and not protecting them from monkeypox? How ridiculous is that?
And masks didn't work for COVID either, right? They didn't work.
So there's plenty of evidence that a respiratory virus that is as small as a influenza virus or a COVID virus is not going to be blocked by a surgical mask. And it'll even escape N95 masks. That's a fact. And so there's plenty of studies. We don't have to do the research. The science is settled. And many doctors are telling the truth about that. Many scientists, you don't have to be a doctor to know the truth, by the way. Yeah. For instance, everybody saw a plastic bag over people's heads and said that was a bad idea, except the doctors and the nurses. So you don't have to be a doctor or a nurse. Wow. A lot of this doesn't take a great deal of mental gymnastics. There's plenty of evidence that we can go with the science and we can go with reality and use common sense. So you remember that they were requiring masks for airplanes and airports, and then that got overturned. Airplanes didn't fall out of the sky after that was overturned.
No.
We didn't have a disaster. As a matter of fact, the pandemic ended shortly after that.
Right. Yeah.
And so we had Biden himself saying the pandemic's over. We had
Yeah.
Fauci say the pandemic's over, the emergency's over. And so how did that happen when we no longer had to wear masks on planes and airports?
Right. Right.
So, you know, how about science? I think we're all worn out with this mandates and decrees from on high. We see Fauci say you got to wear a mask when you're in close company with someone, and then we see pictures of him on the internet with people shoulder to shoulder at baseball fields not wearing a mask. We see decrees for thee, but not for me. Mandates for you, but not for me.
Yeah.
Over and over again. And so, I mean, there's tons of examples
Yeah.
of the ruling class
Yeah.
saying what the masses are going to do with no science to back it up. But
I was
here's
just
science. Go to decinideworks.com for science studies.
I was just with my osteo, Dr. Bartlett, and she was saying that she spoke with, actually, no, correction, sorry, I stand corrected. It wasn't my osteo. It was someone else I knew who was in affiliation with federal MPs of the Australian government down here. And she said that they weren't mandated to get the shot during COVID. Everyone else was, but they weren't. There was no mandates for them. And many of them didn't have it. So what's that about?
Wow.
You know,
Wow.
there's reality that we're seeing, and then we're being sold a fantasy. And we have seen the fantasy that's being sold to the masses fall apart over and over and over again. If you get the shot, you won't get COVID. We were all told that.
Right.
We were told that if you get the shot, you get that so you don't kill grandma.
Right.
And get that shot so you don't spread it. Do this for your community. And then we found out that the shot doesn't stop the spread. We had the USS Milwaukee, a naval vessel, U.S. naval vessel, fully vaxxed people on the naval vessel, and then they have an outbreak of COVID. And so clearly it didn't prevent the spread. And it didn't prevent you from getting it either, because everybody was fully vaxxed and then they have an outbreak. Yeah. We saw this on cruise ships that were fully vaxxed. So nobody's confused now. We know we were lied to.
Yeah.
And,
aren't they even admitting that the latest variant, of COVID, that it's more likely to infect the vaccinated, and they're more likely to get sicker, right? Yeah.
And so, I've seen so much tragedy that should not have happened in the last 3 years. I showed up in the emergency room 2 months ago to work. They said, "Doc, you can't go in the call room." I said, "Why?" They said, "The doctor died in there last night and we're cleaning the room." I said, "What?" She had gotten COVID. She was fully vaxxed and boosted, 54 years old, in good health with no pre-existing condition. And she had COVID 3 weeks before. She was recovering from the congestion, the sore throat, and showed up to work in the ER as the ER doctor and died suddenly in the bed. We were told if you get the shot, you won't die from COVID. She was fully vaxxed and boosted, and she died. And then her twins had their 10th birthday 3 days after her death.
Wow.
There's a trail of tears, death, and destruction that has happened for the last 3.5 years. And there's a whole lot of stuff that's been sold as science that is later proven to be false, where tried and true science still stands. And so the fact that a virus is fastidious, delicate, does not have a cell wall to protect it like bacteria. And so if you use mouthwash, it kills 99% of germs. If you go to budesonideworks.com, you click on the study, and you'll see that it was already proven in the UK at a university that mouthwash kills COVID on contact. What a good idea. How hard is that? Is that too simple? And people don't want to do it because it makes sense. So I'm recommending to everyone, use mouthwash daily right now. Use it twice a day. And if a community does that, watch and see that they're going to have less trouble than a community that doesn't use mouthwash. Also, if someone gets sick with COVID, hello, Oxford University, Stoic trial, principal trial, a whole lot of information at a website called budesonideworks.com.
And by the way, Dr. Bartlett has no financial ties to that drug.
I don't own or operate that website.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, I care about people. And there are many doctors and nurses, and you don't have to be a doctor or a nurse, by the way, to help people.
Right.
And so we have seen many people save lives. Jody, you're a hero, and you have saved many lives because information can save a life.
Yeah.
And withholding information can kill people.
Yeah.
And so you have gone out of your way to share life-saving information. And I know that many people owe you their life.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Well, I could not do it when people ask me why did you sacrifice 2 years of your life to do this for free? Because I could. And I felt that I had to because I didn't want everyone to die, And
well, what's going on there? I mean, why is that such a big deal to you, Jody? It doesn't seem to be a big deal to other people.
I know. Yeah, I got family members going, "Why are you helping people?" And then when they get covered, they're like, "Oh my God, help me!"
They're the first person to call you.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a mystery until they need it.
Yeah. And also, Dr. Bartlett's sister Laura, she has been helping people escape the hospital protocols and getting them out of the hospital, which has been very difficult and is still going on. Patient rights are still being violated. And we've got that information also on Budesonide Works. If you've got a loved one stuck in the hospital and you need help, she's amazing. And she will, she volunteers to do that. And I don't know anybody who can do it better than her and Greta Crawford. They're working together on helping people get out of the hospital. And then I wanted to ask you, oh yes. So, during the last few years, during COVID, I don't know if it's the FDA or the drug companies have come up with vaccines for, smallpox and Ebola/Marburg. Why would they be doing that during a pandemic?
Jody, it's not just those. So in 1986, Congress passed a loophole for one industry, the vaccine manufacturers, that if a vaccine was proven to kill your baby, you can't sue the vaccine manufacturer.
Right.
If a vaccine caused you to go blind and it's proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, and everybody agrees, a judge agrees, a jury agrees, you can't sue a vaccine manufacturer. And so there's no financial risk to a particular industry. And so there's a mad dash to come up with anything that can be called a vaccine right now to any disease. And I'll tell you, a lot of diseases, like look at news right now is that Bangladesh is having their biggest outbreak of dengue fever, a virus that's spread by mosquito bites. And so guess what? They're also promoting, they're working really hard for a vaccine for dengue fever. It's spread by mosquitoes. And did you know that mosquitoes have been unleashed made in a lab, in a factory, and millions of mosquitoes have been dumped on Bangladesh recently? At the same time that you know that those little flying needles are spreading disease from person to person, dengue fever, West Nile virus, Zika, malaria, the list goes on.
Yeah.
They're called a vector. Mosquito control is a good idea, but to dump mosquitoes on populations apparently is not a good idea.
No.
Because they just started that January of 2022. And guess what? This is their worst year ever of dengue fever. Oh, but don't worry, they're already working on a vaccine for dengue fever. I think that's an amazing coincidence. And we're seeing that with a lot of things right now.
Well, and I saw I think there was a couple of articles talking about Biden funding weaponized, or they didn't call it weaponized. I'm calling it weaponized mosquitoes to be dumped on Florida and California.
We've already had that happen in Texas, Florida, California, and Bangladesh. And who knows how many other countries we're going to find have
and they're funded by Bill Gates. What a coincidence.
Funded. Why are mosquitoes, which are a known vector to carry all these diseases, being dumped on populations? Why are ticks being multiplied in labs and being unleashed as well? Because ticks and mosquitoes spread diseases. And so it seems like a bad idea to me. I'm not convinced it's a good idea. I think Bangladesh is exhibit A, that maybe it was a bad idea.
Yeah.
So you're asking a good question. I saw a video where Bill Gates promised that we're going to see smallpox. We're going to see Ebola. We're going to see Spanish flu pandemics.
And that was years ago.
How would he know that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And secondly, isn't it interesting they made vaccines for these recently for the masses?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we had CDC Director Robert Redfield say he's expecting the great pandemic to be a weaponized bird flu. Oh, by the way, Jody, not one human has ever died from bird flu yet in the history of humanity. Never.
So he's just putting that out there because he said it was like a 50% mortality.
So when it happens,
yeah.
So when it happens, that's not going to be natural.
Right.
Of course, we'll be told it's a natural phenomenon.
Oh, that's right. Because he said they were doing gain of function research with bird flu, and then a few minutes later, he says, "Oh, by the way, the next great pandemic was bird flu."
We'll probably be told it's from a bat in China, or from a pangolin, or from something natural, which will later be proven wrong.
Right. Right. But as you've always said, you don't live in fear, right? Do not live in fear.
You're not helpless or hopeless.
Yeah.
And a strategy to motivate the masses is to put them in fear.
Yeah,
yes.
Because they're uncomfortable and they're willing to move anywhere you can direct them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly, at this point, it's not accidental. That COVID did not come from a bat in nature.
Right.
There was a Wuhan Institute of Virology, and they actually had a coronavirus that was being worked on in gain of function genetic engineering that was called WIV1. Wuhan Institute of Virology 1. What?
Yeah.
What? And so we have bioweapon labs around the world, apparently. You know, people have no problem believing that there's such a thing as chemical weapons. But we have been so sedated to the reality that it sure looks like COVID was a bioweapon that's killed 1.1 million Americans and counting.
Right.
Wow.
And nobody's talking about that clearly. Yeah. They're calling it
all the variants are so different too. What they're calling variants, which I personally believe are different bioweapons they're testing out on us. That's just my personal belief.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, we've given people a lot to chew on tonight.
Well, and I have one question that I've been wanting to ask you, Dr. Bartlett. It's all right. This isn't one I had in the pre-questions, Jody. Was that we've seen a rise in cancers with people who are vaccinated and a rise in strokes and heart attacks in people who are vaccinated. But I've also seen a lot of rise of cancers and strokes and heart attacks and neurological events in people who did not take the vaccine. Now, do you have a hypothesis, Dr. Bartlett, as to what that might be? What might be causing that?
So the COVID itself, when it first came out of the lab, I said that on purpose, caused clotting and caused inflammation and was not natural in its disease process. It was a mystery to all doctors around the planet, except those that were on the inside creating it.
Yeah.
And those that were talking about how and trying to cover up that it was from a lab, which were some of our leaders in the United States, apparently.
Right.
I think there's a whole lot of information that came out of emails with Fauci lately, showing that maybe he was trying to cover up that it was not from a natural source. But we know that that deadly bioweapon caused increased clotting and inflammation. We know that certain cancers are caused by inflammation. But at this point, the COVID that's going around right now is weaker than ever. And so what we're seeing is all those things that were listed on the Pfizer information that was released by the FDA, we're seeing a lot of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So potential shedding then? From being around the vaccinated? So potential shedding from being around the vaccinated?
There is a talk of shedding. I'm not an expert on that. But I can tell you that in Japan, did I mention in Osaka, Japan, they're not recommending COVID shots anymore?
You did.
Yes.
Okay. I mentioned that on purpose, by the way. And so, there's a lot of good studies out there, good reporting done by AmericanFaith.com. And so if people want to look at AmericanFaith.com, a free online news network for more information on this stuff, that will complement what you'll hear today and from your source. And I am grateful, Annie and Jody, for you putting the truth out. Thank you for all you're doing and all you've done. I know you're not going to stop either, because I know
No. Yeah, that's true. And I just want to let everybody know that Dr. Bartlett has been incredibly targeted because of him coming out and telling the truth and saving people's lives. I won't go into the details of what he has gone through, but it is pretty horrific. And I have been targeted as well. And I do believe that that's why I got so sick in 2021 and almost died several times. And it was very scary. And I had long ongoing symptoms similar to long COVID, that really, really bad. And I personally, the only thing that helped me really tackle all of those was recently when I started using the LifeWave X39 patch and a few others of their patches. But I want to know from you, like, do you treat long COVID? And or anything like that? And are you using those patches for anything in the ER or personally?
So the LifeWave patches are not traditional medicine,
right?
And so Jody, you will have a lot of information for people about that.
Yeah.
I will say that there are people with long COVID or people that have been injured possibly by the vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
That if they're having respiratory problems, the budesonide will help. I've seen people who were told there's no hope for you improve.
Yeah. Well, and we also have a lot of providers on the website that are specializing in long COVID as well. So, and I didn't know if usually you're seeing emergency stuff, so you're not seeing ongoing.
My role is in the emergency room in emergency medicine. And so I can tell you, boots on the ground, front line, what is happening right now in our communities.
Right.
And I can tell you that compared to 3 years ago, we're not overrunning the ER with COVID cases. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
We are seeing people with COVID. They're not in respiratory distress for the most part. And if they get a nebulizer treatment of budesonide, over and over again, we hear, wow, that was miraculous. Wow, that was instant relief.
Right.
And I can breathe again.
Yeah.
And so, give credit to credit where credit's due. Oxford University, Stoic trial, principal trial. Right. If people are mad that budesonide works, they can get mad at Oxford.
Yeah, exactly. So, give us, in our parting thing, give us, what's the number one thing people can do, or however many things people can do to protect themselves from possibly upcoming pandemics?
Three things for COVID that's going around. One is use budesonide nose spray every day. That downregulates ACE receptors. I wrote a paper. The link to the paper is at the budesonideworks.com.
Yeah.
I won't wear people out with how it works. They can read that paper.
Okay.
Second thing is mouthwash frequently.
Okay.
And if they get COVID, use budesonide is effective according to Oxford.
Right.
And I have found that that's the case. Also, if someone has asthma or they have a respiratory disease already, budesonide is used preventively to protect people from asthma safely for decades. People use it daily.
Oh, my mom used it for 30 years, almost every day.
And when you had 30,000 people die in New York at the beginning of the pandemic, they looked at the top 10 comorbidities. Asthma was not on the list.
Exactly.
Patients with asthma are on budesonide and inhaled steroids as their first line, most effective preventive measure.
There you go.
Wow.
Yeah.
Details.
Right, exactly.
Hashtag science.
Yeah, and also just I've always tell everybody, if you do not have a nebulizer at home, you want to have one immediately. They're available on Amazon. We have a link on Budesonide Works to Amazon, or if you want to get it. They're prescription only at drugstores, but you can get them off Amazon, because you don't want to be stuck all of a sudden you can't breathe and you don't have a nebulizer. It'll freak you out because then you feel like you have to go to the hospital, and you don't want to be in that situation.
We are seeing some rolling shortages, for budesonide nose spray, which is over the counter, doesn't require a prescription. Rolling shortages for budesonide nebulizer medicine, respials at pharmacies right now.
Oh, really?
So
that's interesting.
To delay is not a good idea.
No, yeah, you want to have it at home. We always want to make sure you have everything. We have all the stuff that you need to get at home in case you get anything. And it's not just COVID or variant, but other things that may be coming that have very similar
Other respiratory
symptoms.
diseases.
Yeah, exactly. Because you just want to be prepared and not scared. And once you're prepared, you don't have to worry because you have everything you need. And then we have a whole network of doctors around the country that can help you if you get sick on the website. And very few people. I don't know of anybody who used our website who didn't make it.
The final thing is someone does get COVID, it causes clotting. So people need to be on aspirin if they don't have a complication. Right. And if they're already on a anticoagulant, then they're safe from that particular complication.
Yeah.
They don't need aspirin if they're already on another.
And we've got that on the website too, like the emergency stuff to have, and one of them is aspirin or baby aspirin, something like that to prevent the clotting, because people didn't realize that. And that was the thing that put a lot of people in the hospitals because they had clots.
And a lot of people died from clotting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Annie, you got anything else?
No. I think we've covered a lot today, Dr. Bartlett.
Well,
you were on fire. You were like,
Annie, I feel for you down under. So many good people down there in Australia, and you had the COVID concentration camps. You had tyranny. But interestingly, Queensland has a university there that also was a part of the Stoic trial in conjunction with Oxford University. So kudos to Queensland, and for those people calling that out. And so there are good people in Australia, and too many people died down there that should not have died.
Yeah. Well, I think at the end of the day, though, it was more police brutalization and all the other things that are just people not getting treatment because everyone went into fear mode, and for a long time because the silver bullet was the vaccine, the shot. People weren't. There was no ulterior treatment here. There was not even. No one was talking about it. So. We're a much less dense population down here, so it was cricket.
Yeah, you have a couple of senators in Australia that are speaking the truth right now in hearings where they are questioning Pfizer, and it's very telling what's going on. So I'm trying to think of Senator. What's the name of the senator that was
Malcolm Roberts?
Malcolm Roberts. What a hero! And so shout out and kudos to Senator Malcolm Roberts. If you see him, tell him I'm proud of him.
Well, and
Thanks.
there's Dr. Bay. Tell him just a little bit about Dr. Bay.
Yeah, so Dr. William Bay is actually fighting in the High Courts of Australia, and he actually went to the AMA, which is the Australian Medical Association, back during COVID. I think it was 2021. 2022, I choose to remember, and he called them out and said, "Why are we pushing this treatment when it's not effective? And why aren't we allowed to treat our patients? And why are we inflicting this on them?" And so he is well and truly been censored, cut out, and it's shown within the people who are spreading the truth down here in Australia who is really about the truth and who isn't. And sadly, we've got a lot less who are really integral and a lot more snakes in the grass, so to speak.
Yeah.
Tell him thank you as well for me.
Yeah,
I will.
Yeah, maybe we'll get you on a thing together, a panel or something.
Oh, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, because we're going to interview him, I think. So yeah, we're looking forward to
Malcolm Roberts. If people haven't seen that information on the internet, they need to watch that. That'll be really, really telling.
Yeah,
and Senator Rennick too, if memory serves. There's another one who's in
What
the
about
courts.
all
on that.
those government leaders that are a bunch of clowns down there that were rolling up their sleeves and saying, "Get your shot. I got my shot. I feel safe. And if you get the shot, you won't get COVID." And then boom, boom, boom.
They're all publicity stunts. Those syringes weren't filled with anything. They had those retractable needles, and federally they weren't mandated. So I bet none of them.
What a clown show!
Yeah, clown show. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, our political system is more of a farce than yours, which by just maybe a hair, just a hair.
I wonder if you're going to be censored for this show.
Well, we'll see. One more thing that I want to add is, so wouldn't you think it would be a conflict of interest if a leader in our country had stock in, say, a vaccine manufacturer?
So if someone had stock in Pfizer, Moderna, or Johnson & Johnson, and they pushed the production of a new product by Pfizer, Moderna, or Johnson & Johnson, we would call that a financial conflict of interest. And so if you have government leaders that are pushing that have stock in that, you don't have to be a doctor to have a financial conflict of interest.
That's almost like insider trading, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's almost like insider trading. Pretty sure that's criminal.
It is.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk to them publicly about that.
Yeah. There's some former president.
You mean a certain accordion man, maybe, who?
If you can get them on your show, I'd be glad to talk to them in front of the whole world.
Yeah. Let's see.
We'll see how we go.
Yeah,
it's a bit of a tall ask.
Yeah. We might have to do a little snippy on this interview. we won't say who we were referring to, Mr. T. Thomas
Way.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I don't care who they are. If they're a congressman, a senator, a president, if they get stock in that and they're promoting it, that's a conflict of interest.
Yes, it's a conflict.
So I'm going to tell you, spoiler alert, there's a lot of people in government that have a financial conflict of interest.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, we could probably go on all night. Let's wrap it up. I just want to thank you so much, Dr. Bartlett, for everything that you have done. Your courage to come forward and speak the truth and continue to speak the truth while you were getting censored, while you were getting targeted. You definitely helped me survive, and I know you helped millions of people around the world survive this ridiculous last few years. And I wouldn't be here if you hadn't helped me. So thank you,
Jody. It's been a real honor to work beside you, trying to help people. And with or without me, you've helped people day and night for 3.5 years. You put your life on hold to help people, and I'm saying that in front of the whole world right now, that there are millions of people around the world that owe you a debt of gratitude. And so thank you for what you've done and who you are, Jody. And Annie, you two are an amazing dynamic duo.
We are.
Thank you, Dr. Bartlett. Yeah, we are. We have heaps of fun. Spreading the truth and helping people.
Yeah, that's what we're all about.
Yeah.
Thank you,
ladies. Thank you, Dr. Bartlett. And thank you so much for finding a space where you can get some internet. Dr. Bartlett had to go to a Starbucks because his internet unfortunately cut out just as he was trying to get on.
Coinky dinky.
Thank you. Yeah, no coinky dinks here. So we appreciate you, Dr. Bartlett, and thank you so much for your time and for your service to humanity. Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, lovely. Well, thank you, Dr. Bartlett. And so Jody, that was really eye-opening. A whole other level of what actually is going on.
Yeah, and he was just
a good reminder.
He's just because he researches so much every day, and he'll tell me, and I'll be like, oh my gosh, because he's constantly learning and wanting to know the truth and getting to the bottom of everything, so that he can help as many people as he can. And he never stops. He never stops.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm so thankful that we know him, that he is on the planet right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Very few courageous voices speaking what needs to be said, regardless the
consequences.
Cost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So thanks for watching this week. And we look forward to bringing you more breakneck truth telling, freedom. Oh my God. I used to say that better. That was
He doesn't stop. He was on fire.
right. Punch after punch after punch. Yeah. Plenty of bombshells in that one.
Well, yeah, just the fact that I didn't even know it until he told me that he was the doctor behind getting the Pfizer data released. He was in court fighting the whole time. And I think he was the only doctor there. So when he said that, I was like, whoa, so.
Well, so again, for our viewers, budesonideworks.com, plenty of resources and studies and all that Dr. Bartlett had shared.
Right. And a lot of interviews with him. There's a media page with interviews from him. And then we have so many studies articles. There's so much information out there. I tried to make it as palatable as possible. And there's help for preventive help, as well as, if you get sick, and we have a whole network of providers. We have information on long haulers, and we have our wellness toolkit that is basically what Annie and I have been using, or what I have tried over time, and I believe in everything on there. And it's very similar, if not the same toolkit that we have on the Wellness Superheroes, because we try to promote natural and alternative health things as opposed to pharmaceuticals. But because Dr. Bartlett is a traditional physician, and I respect everything he's done, and so I definitely was doing budesonide when I got sick, and I still will do that, because that is a amazing drug that can help rescue you if you can't breathe. And I don't know anything else that can help that. That's really almost the only pharmaceutical that I will do now. But everything else I try to do naturally or alternative, because that's where I'm headed, and I think will help me. Just like I said earlier, the only thing that helped me with long COVID was using the LifeWave patches. And it has pretty much taken care of almost all of my long hauler symptoms. Just a tiny fraction of some of them are left, but I've been struggling since 2021, and to be free of those symptoms in a few months has been a miracle. So, yeah,
that is
quality
resources on that website, and also on our Wellness Superheroes. For certain. Yeah, it would be interesting to see how long this lasts on the YT.
I know, because we did use the V word. I forgot. We were trying to use shots the whole time. So, yeah.
Oh, well. We'll see how we go, but it'll be on all the other platforms that we're on.
And I'll put it on Budesonide Works, the YouTube channel there too, because of course, I have 2 strikes against me on that. So, we'll see.
These aren't the droids you're looking for.
Exactly. We need to be using conscious language, right?
That's it.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah.
Well, so thanks, Jody, and for all your work. And he's right, in how many lives you have saved, and how many people owe you their gratitude and their life. I've seen how hard you've worked, and you are a stand-up citizen. You are a pillar above many.
Well, thank you. Or I guess you're welcome.
That's right.
Thank you.
You've got it.
Thank you. No, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for being my podcast partner.
Anytime. I love riding shotgun with you. This is so much fun. It's time in my life, that's for sure.